now listening to the Serious Growth Podcast with your host, Leo Costa Jr.
It was an aggressive tour, but it went great.
No kidding. And you got good turnout?
Oh, yeah. We had over 4,000 people nationwide attend the seminars.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And what were you talking about in your seminars?
Nutrition, primarily, training.
Yeah.
And Bobby is, he's a retired Purple Heart Iraqi war vet. And so he talked about some mental health issues for PTSD and suicide prevention.
Oh, yeah. And did you guys talk about how maybe nutrition can help with that? I mean, does it help with that?
100%. Yeah, I did a video called Stress for Success where I addressed how important that sleep and nutrition and regular exercise are for mental health for sure.
Yeah, there's no question about that. I know there's been a couple of times in my life where I've been pretty stressed out. Go through a divorce brings back memories. And, as much as I did not want to get up and go to the gym, it always felt better, and I was in a better spot, after I got done training just for that 1 hour. Amazing what it does, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So tell me, how did you get the name Rhino? I mean, you look huge, so I'm assuming, but how did you get the name?
Yeah, I was a power lifter, pro bodybuilder, and I trained with Flex Wheeler back in 2008 and 2009, and that was his nickname for me, so it just stuck.
So you got it from him?
Yep, I was lifting heavy weights. Everything I wanted to do all the heavy stuff, and so he just called me the Rhino. It was hard for him to convince me to give that up in order to get better at bodybuilding, but he finally did, and it really worked. It's two different sports.
Oh yeah, sure is. Totally different. Yeah, a lot of people don't understand that. And of course, there's been always a debate about how do you train to put on more muscle? Is it train heavy or train for volume? And I'm of the opinion that it's volume training. That does the specific response to volume is muscle growth, and then you have secondary benefit of getting stronger, as opposed to the other way. Is that the way you feel?
You're absolutely right. Yeah, powerlifting did nothing for my bodybuilding, but I'll tell you, bodybuilding did a lot for my powerlifting. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, the guys that are I haven't seen any powerlifting recently, but I know from when I first started watching powerlifting to the guys that kind of shape they were in after a lot of years after that, they were actually in pretty damn good shape. Where the years and years before, just put on as much weight as you possibly can, and you were actually fat, but you were strong, and it seemed like it changed over the years.
Yeah, that's a lot of what I do now is try and help people who have just gotten over fat, try and get healthy, and then cycle their weight throughout the year along with their competition training.
Are you still, you look like you're still training. Are you training for any particular reason other than just feeling good and being in shape?
Yeah, just to feel good. I'm 52 now. I try not to do any damage to myself, and I certainly want to lead by example and show other folks that they can have a long, healthy life lifting weights. So I'm a lot more responsible with it now.
Yeah. And do you have your own home gym now that all this is shut down, or how's that working out for you?
I do. I have a really nice garage gym that everybody came over to my house while COVID shutdown was happening. And but I'm in Las Vegas, and the gym's opened back up, and I went back in because they've got air conditioning, and I don't in my garage.
Oh, yeah. So are they opening up with some restrictions?
Yeah, you got to wear a mask. While you're doing hard sets, you can take it off, and then they just want you to be somewhat responsible, clean your equipment, but it's been reasonable.
Yeah, they're of course in California they just want to keep everything shut down, but we have a couple of gyms that's opened up, but it's brutal out here as to what's going on, especially with the big box gyms. I mean, I went down to LA for Santa Monica, Venice, 4th of July, and they're closed now, and there's no, I asked them when they're going to open. They have no idea. I mean, how can they come back from that, Stan?
I don't know. Businesses are going to suffer, that's for sure. And, more so, I think it's important to know that a lot of the people that go to those gyms, like we just talked about, it's their release. Yeah. I think it's really had an adverse effect on people's health, physically and mentally.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I came out, because I'll never forget, it's March 12th when this went down, and I saw Newsom talking about, this thing, and I asked myself, what am I going to do? And I decided to stay open and I never closed. Now I'm a little different because I'm a studio about 3,000 feet, maybe not even 3,000 feet, by appointment only personal training. And as it turned out, because 8 years ago I had 3 strokes in 3 weeks. I don't know if you know that, but they paralyzed me, and I do stroke therapy, and that kept me. They kept trying to shut me down, but because of the fact that it was by appointment only, I could social distance. But I always believed, Stan, and still to this day, I think gyms got a bad rap on this, because normally people that go to the gyms are healthy, and when you're healthy like that, you're building your immune system, and it doesn't make sense to close those places down.
Nope.
It's stupid.
Nope.
My opinion. They got a bad rap. But none of this has made sense anyway. When you're talking with people about, sounds like you're doing a fair amount of work in nutrition. What's your approach, and how do you go down that path with somebody who's over fat? All right, let's take a quick break so I can tell you about our product.
Do you want a bone-crushing grip? Good, because you're going to get one with the amazing new TRS gripper. It's a progressive grip builder with longer handles and a special ergonomic design that's like a dozen hand grippers in one. Start off easy and work your way up to quickly build your grip strength from wet noodle to pulverizing. The package includes a video from the world-famous strength coach, Dr. Russ Horine, the man who worked with Leo Costa to help bring you big beyond belief in the Bulgarian Power Burst. Dr. Horine shows you a simple and easy to follow workout plan that takes just minutes a day right from in front of your TV set if you want. So click on the link below and let's get started building you a stronger, firmer, bone-crushing grip.
Well, for the heavy athletes, the first thing we got to do is drop some weight off of them. 95% of health benefits are realized simply by weight loss itself, irrespective of the diet. I sell a very particular diet, the vertical diet, and I'm very bullish on what I recommend. But I think the most important thing is to understand that irrespective of how you lose the weight, at least initially, in terms of finding something that people can comply with. They're going to benefit from lower blood sugars, lower blood pressure, lower cholesterol, improved cardiovascular fitness, all of that. So I just try and get the weight off first, obviously trying to retain lean muscle mass by getting adequate protein and lifting weights. And that's for everyone. Obviously the athletes are doing that. Because a lot of what happens with my overweight strength athletes, and this could be offensive linemen in football. I work with Lane Johnson from the Philadelphia Eagles. It can be World's Strongest Men. I work with Hafthor Bjornsson. I worked with Brian Shaw and a host of other, big-time strongmen. And then powerlifters, of course. They tend to hold on to a lot of weight for a long period of time. Yeah. And they end up with metabolic syndrome, fatty liver disease, elevated cholesterol and blood sugars. And then their performance starts to suffer. Hafthor reached out to me 4 years ago. He said he was getting fatter, not stronger. Wow. And it was a concern. Now, I started out in college as a 140-pound skinny kid. And I spent the bulk of my, I started competing in bodybuilding in 1986. I was training with Aaron Madron back then at the time, an old name that you might recall on the front of magazines and the like. I trained in the early 90s with Phil Hernan, someone that you're familiar with. Quite familiar. I was actually a Gold's Gym nutrition analysis. I worked for Neil Spruce back when he started the Gold's Gym stuff. So I go back a long ways, but I started bulking to try and get bigger, and I started powerlifting because I thought that the stronger I got, the bigger I'd get. Right. Which we just discussed as a fallacy. You learn as you go. And so I ultimately bulked up to over 300 pounds many times throughout my career when I was powerlifting, and then I would diet down to compete as an IFBB Pro bodybuilder many times. And I learned simply, by accident. When I was bulking, sometimes I would dirty bulk and get fat, and I would get blood tests very often throughout my career, and I would see the results. I would see the elevated cholesterol. Of course, the blood pressure would go up. I would see the blood sugars adversely affected and the AST, ALT, liver enzymes. I knew what was happening, and I was just pushing the envelope because I was a competitive athlete. And when you're young, you just kind of stick your head in the sand and figure I'm invincible.
Right.
But as I got older and I started to learn and I started to diet down and then go back up and diet down and go back up, I started to see there were certain things that I could do to retain better metabolic health longer, and then only push myself into that, that gray zone for the last 30 to 40 days before competition. Yeah. Very short period of time. I've done rants where I've talked about the fact that if you want to be healthy, you don't compete. There's a big difference between health and fitness, and fitness being the ability to perform a particular duty or task, and the fitness level required to be a world's strongest man is not healthy. No. We understand that. Yeah. But there are some things we can do to mitigate damage, and there are some ways throughout the career that we can cycle. Just like you periodize your training with your weightlifting, you can periodize your weight. And so to get back to Hofthorpe, I knew immediately what was going on, and I said, you need to drop some weight. And he was concerned because when you drop weight, you lose strength. Right. Mass moves mass. Right. And he's a strong man, and so, but I said, trust me, I can get you down, get you healthy, and then take you back up and keep you healthier than you would be otherwise if you just stayed fat. Yeah. And in fact, we know that if you lose about 7 to 10% of your body weight, you can resolve 95% of fatty liver as tested by biopsy. And so I only had to bring him down. He was 435 pounds at the time.
How tall was he?
He's 6'9".
Yeah, pretty tall guy, but still.
Yeah, he's huge. Yeah, Hofthorpe's huge. He's a mountain from Game of Thrones, so he's a monster. Yeah. So we dieted him down to the low 390s. We took off about 10% of his body weight, about 40 pounds, a little more than 40 pounds. And he felt a lot healthier, of course, as everyone does when they lose weight. And we found a few things that were causing, I think, that were accelerating some of those metabolic syndrome problems that I often find with a lot of these big athletes. And one is sleep apnea. Yeah. And so we made sure that he got a CPAP. He wasn't wearing one previously. And that has a dramatic effect on blood pressure and general health as well. Also insulin sensitivity, which is important for athletes who are eating food and they need it to partition to muscle instead of fat. He was vitamin D3 deficient. I see this commonly in big athletes in particular, down in the 20s. And that really impairs recovery. It impairs calcium absorption and sleep. And there's a host of benefits for D3. We're seeing now with COVID, it helps with upper respiratory tract infections and a whole host of things. Also, with fatty liver, you need to increase your choline. Choline will heal and prevent fatty liver. It's very critical. And you get choline from whole eggs. You can get about 1,000 milligrams of choline a day from 6 whole eggs. Sounds counterintuitive to throw whole eggs at an overweight athlete, but in fact, it does help solve the problem, particularly when you're at a calorie deficit. So I dieted him down. We fixed those things, and then we had to take him back up. And what a lot of powerlifters and strongmen do is they basically eat like an asshole. They just eat too much. And they eat a lot of too high fat, pizza, pasta, pancakes, assortment of things, just fat and sugar, highly processed foods.
Just to get that calories in to maintain a 400-pound body, it takes a lot of damn calories.
It takes a lot of calories. I think they find over time that that's the only calories they can eat enough of. Yeah. Because if they were to eat, things that were higher in fiber, or higher in protein, or higher in satiety, then they wouldn't be able to get enough calories in to gain weight. So I took a lot of that stuff out. A lot of problems that they have, they end up with hypertension from excess sodium intake, but it's really from a lack of potassium. They need the salt to perform. So I increase their potassium, and it helps regulate their water balance so they're not as bloated. Yeah. They don't have as much water retention, particularly in the face or the ankles. Yeah. They end up with a lot of gas and bloating and diarrhea and constipation. And so I take out what's called high FODMAP foods. You're familiar with fermentable oligomonosaccharides and polyols. It's a list of foods that has been tested with people to kind of differentiate between those that cause more bloating and gas and those that cause less.
Okay.
And it's used quite commonly with nutritionists for people who have IBS, IBD, Crohn's, those kinds of problems, a lot of gas and bloating. It's probably the number one used, what they call elimination diet for people who suffer from those problems. Has about a 60 to 80% success rate for people who choose low FODMAP foods. So I start to have them gain weight using the lower FODMAP foods. I actually reduce their protein a little bit because it's so satiating and has a higher thermic effect of food. They get fewer calories out of it. Sounds counterintuitive, but in a calorie surplus and with high carbs, you're very unlikely to be catabolic, and carbohydrates are protein sparing. So what it does is affords them more appetite.
Yeah.
And so I brought their protein down just a little. I bring their fats down a little, and I drive carbs pretty hard. But I do something called the 10-minute walk. I've been squawking about for many years now. Immediately after each meal, or within 20 minutes, I have them take a 10-minute walk or get on a recumbent bike and ride. And that dramatically improves blood sugars. Twice as effective as metformin, which is the number one prescribed diabetic type 2 diabetes medication in the world. Mm-hmm. And that dramatically helps with their digestion. It helps with their blood sugars. Their sugars don't spike as high or stay elevated as long, and so their insulin stays down, which also helps with blood pressure. So those are some of the things that I utilize to push their weight up without pushing up their insulin and their blood pressure and all those things. That's kind of a long-winded explanation, but it's all pretty simple, pretty basic, pretty effective stuff that we do to get these big athletes to continue to compete and improve year over year and stay healthier.
So do you find, like in that your powerlifter or the strongman, his case, is he stronger at a lighter weight because of the way you're doing this with him, or is his weight as far as lifting is that off because of less mass?
No, they all lose strength when they lose weight. And I experienced that throughout my career. That's the hardest thing mentally for them to come to terms with. But I promise them that if they give me 6 months, we'll drop them down for 2 to 3 months, and then I'll take them back up for 3 months. When they get back up, they've gained significantly more muscle, have less body fat. They're much stronger. You see their upper bodies start to grow, the carbohydrates start funneling into muscle, and they definitely perform better, but they also feel better with the digestion and the water retention, the sleep improvement from the apnea problems and the walking. They just feel much better.
Yeah, I know that through my bodybuilding career, I noticed that every time I dieted down and then I ate back up again, it took longer before I started putting on fat, because when I dropped weight, I had dropped so much muscle weight. So the quality was better every time I came back, to the point where I got to where I didn't have to lose more than 20 pounds for the shows, which is less, traumatic to the body. I could perform it.
That was my experience. Every time I dieted down, I would rebound and I would gain more muscle and less fat. And then it would be easier to diet down again, and I could come in at a heavier body weight and have retained more muscle mass. And then when I rebounded back up, I got even stronger and bigger. And it was kind of, you remember Eddie Cohn, the greatest powerlifters of all time. I worked with Eddie. I went out and had Eddie help me over 10 years ago when I was powerlifting, and we're still friends today. Throughout his career, Eddie would only compete in 2 powerlifting meets a year. And in between each meet, he would do bodybuilding training. More reps, more sets, more volume, more frequency, less rest time. He would just become, I think, aerobically better fit. And I think because of the variety of exercises that we do as bodybuilders, it shore up all of his weaknesses.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. And
so I encourage that for all of my strong athletes, is to diet down, do some bodybuilding stuff, and then ramp back up.
It's just that, the mindset of a powerlifter, a strongman, and bodybuilder, I just hate, to drop that weight, because it's so hard to put the muscle on. But if you're willing to follow that strategy, it really does pay off. It's just, that's what separates everybody, is the ones that are willing to go out there and do stuff that they're uncomfortable with doing, is usually the ones that end up getting the most result. At least I found that. But what you're talking about, I wrote a special report I just had come out of Bulgaria when I wrote this, How to Put on 4 pounds of muscle in 10 days. Yeah. And maybe you know the story behind that, but, which was really shocking to me as an American. We're so lucky over here, but during those days over there, they couldn't get a really good source of protein year round, which was mind-boggling to me coming from the United States, But they just took advantage of that problem that they had. And so when they starved their body like that, protein starved their body like that, which is similar to when you're dropping somebody's weight down. Well, the minute you started giving them protein back to the body, it wanted to hoard it in a way that, because I just figured that's what was going on, because hell, I wouldn't put on fat it'd be like maybe 3 months past what I would normally start putting on fat. It just seemed like it came back in muscle first.
Agreed. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, pretty interesting. So when you're talking about the vertical diet, is that what you were just explaining to me? Why don't you tell us about what the vertical diet actually means? Because I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, well, it's really the culmination of everything I've learned from over 30 years of competing, coaching, college, of course, collaborations with other great athletes, and working with great coaches. I've worked with Flex Wheeler, Mark Bell's a great coach, Charles Glass, I've trained with him, Eddie Cohn I mentioned, Dave Palumbo. I've hired these guys over the last 15 years. Charles Poliquin I've worked with. We've done seminars internationally, and even like Oscar, who used to train Kai and Hani and Chris Aceto. I've been out seeking out the best knowledge that I can find. And then, of course, there's a lot of science-based practitioners now that write a lot of the books and do a lot of the research that I attend their seminars. And I've really kind of pulled everything that I've learned, from my personal experience, from working with athletes. I was a high school soccer coach. I coached a bunch of the University of Oregon football players, and then I've worked with high school collegiate professional athletes for 30 years. And I've just tried to compile it all into one document. And every time somebody came to me and said, Stan, can you help me with my nutrition or training? I would give this to them and say, I want you to do everything in here, step by step. It's sleep, it's hydration, it's nutrition, it's digestion, it's hormone optimization. Obviously the training and some of the things that we just talked about that I do. So it's really it's a very comprehensive program. I've refined it over the years. I've been using it with my athletes for about 10 years. It's what I used with Hawthorne, Sean, and Lane Johnson, and Larry Wheels, and, Stone Cold Steve Austin when I worked with him, and, just so many other great athletes, UFC fighters, CrossFit national champions, Camille LeBlanc, Ben Smith, Becca Voigt, Olympia competitors, Nadia Wyatt took third in the Miss Olympia. So the list goes on and on. But more recently, as people started hearing about me and the athletes I was working with, probably about 2 or 3 years ago, I did a seminar in Iceland with Hafthor, got over 6 million views on YouTube. Oh. I named the diet, which was typically they would just come to Stan Efferding, and I would give them my program, doing online training or personal training. And I named the diet and I published it. I made an ebook out of it so that anybody could access it. And it went viral worldwide. We've had over 100,000 unique users now access it's an ebook, so they use a username and password to get the information. So, and it's really just step by step everything that I want them to do. And then when I work with a client directly, I send them a questionnaire and I get some additional details as to their goals, blood work. We interpret that to see if they have any specific needs or health problems, et cetera. But that's, in effect, that's what the vertical diet is. It's just the program that I've, I didn't claim to invent it. It's just everything that I've learned over the years. I've boiled it down into a really simple, easy to use list of to-dos, checklist, daily items. And it's been wildly popular. And so I've been now in 10 countries and 50 states in the last 2 years doing seminars and talking about how I think people should eat on both ends of the spectrum. We talked about how I work with heavy athletes fixing metabolic syndrome. I also work with dieters, of course, as an IFBB Pro bodybuilder. I've dieted many, many times to competition shape. And not just athletes, but the general public. What we've seen, and unfortunately it's been going on for decades, and it's even more pronounced now because there's so many more people involved in the diet industry, bodybuilding, figure, physique, bikini. Yep. And then the general public has started to look at the diets of these professional dieters, these bikini girls, and follow them. And it's tragic what happens. On the dieting side, we see over-restriction, micronutrient deficiencies manifesting in health problems like anemia and amenorrhea and osteoporosis and hypothyroidism and hair falling out. A lot of muscle loss and depression. All sorts of things are happening because we're trying to follow these over-restricted diets, which are egg whites, tilapia, and broccoli. Yeah. And I'm just sick about it, that it's so pervasive, both in the competitive industry and now in the general public, that I present the vertical diet as the antithesis to that. It's red meat, it's whole eggs, it's yogurt, it's salmon, it's fruit, it's salt on your food, an iodine source of all things, God, good Lord, that people aren't getting. And there's nothing particularly new about it. As long as you've been in the industry, you certainly remember that Vince Gironda was talking about this stuff in the 60s.
Oh yeah.
And how it disappeared and when and where, I don't know, but it's tragic. Vince Gironda was talking about the importance of red meat, whole eggs, yeah. And he was talking at the time about sea kelp for iodine, yeah, for thyroid function. Yeah. So there's a lot to be learned from a long history of successful athletes that unfortunately has not been been used in the current dieting community. And so I'm trying to rail against that and educate people against that, because I'm tired of seeing all of the health problems associated with weight loss.
Yeah. I think when your program sounds like it's almost a little more holistic, because you're taking other factors in. So it makes sense. And I like the way there's nothing wrong with, I don't think, I did the same thing. I wrote a little training program called RAMP. Basically, I took what I learned from Vince, what I learned from Platts, and what I learned from my own training. And I created something, based on that. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. But you have to have, obviously you have to have an open mind to do that, because so many of the athletes, I worked with a lot of pros back in my day. Sometimes they were really hard to deal with because they weren't open-minded about certain things, and yeah. At least I noticed that, back then. I mean, I was dealing with baseball players who didn't believe in weight training, believe it or not. Mark McGuire and Ken Seiko. Mark McGuire and were the Bash brothers. They turned this thing around to where baseball basically is now all of them are training, where back then it was just them and a couple of guys because they thought it was going to ruin their swing. So, you have to have people that are open-minded enough, and you have to be able to convince them that you should be doing this, that what you're doing right now is not working because of all the problems that they're having with their health. And you would think it would be otherwise,
Yeah, we saw that with Kobe Bryant in basketball. He got a lot of the basketball players to start lifting weights. We saw that with in golf with Tiger Woods who's lifting weights. Yeah. So other people started lifting weights, and they learned. I've said, the diet is just one piece. I tell customers and clients, look, you're not on the vertical diet if you're not getting 7+ hours of quality sleep a night. Right. I can't fix that with nutrition. You're not on the vertical diet if you are not lifting weights. Some sort of resistance training has to be incorporated. Yeah. There's no other way about it. Sorry, I just lost you there briefly. That's all right. There's no two ways around it. We talk about exercise, and exercise is important, but it's a huge priority that it starts with some sort of resistance training to retain bone mass, to hold on to lean body mass. Otherwise, your metabolism is going to crash. You're just going to be skinnier and fatter than you started, and you're going to regain the fat and not the muscle. And so those things, as far as I'm concerned, they all have to go together.
How do you, with regard to, I know you train, it seems like you work with a lot of athletes, but to the general public, like in my studio that I still have left, personal training, most of, even throughout the years, I didn't train a lot of athletes. I stuck more with the people that were wanting to accomplish and attain a better fitness level, tight tone, condition of the body. And it just so happens back in '82 when I started, those are the people that had the money more than the athletes that were available to me at that point, But how do you keep, I know that when you're dealing with an athlete, I think the advantage that you have with an athlete, even though they can be stubborn sometimes, they do have the mindset of they have perfect willingness to do what it takes because they've gotten to a certain point. You just don't get there without having a certain mindset. We know that. But when it gets down to the person that is coming to you that wants to get better health and fitness, that's a different animal. And I talk about this all the time. I mean, these people, so many times, they start sabotaging themselves when they're getting, like they're just starting to hit a stride and they sabotage. How do you deal with something like that? Because what you're talking about with the vertical diet is, again, what you said, comprehensive. So how do you keep that particular person on target?
I'm glad you brought it up. 100%. That is the challenge. I have a lot more clients that are dad bods and soccer moms than I do athletes. There's no question. Now that the vertical diet has gotten so popular, there's a few things. First of all, I talk about what do successful dieters do? And we know that from the Weight Control Registry, who has for 10 years now studied over 10,000 dieters and tracked their progress. And those who have lost over 66 pounds and kept it off for over 5 years, there are certain behaviors. 98% of them went on a diet. Any diet, a plan is better than no plan. And so at least coming out of the gate, we have to agree that if you want to lose weight, then you're going to need to at least go on some sort of diet. And I'm not terribly particular, to be honest with you. I want to find what works for them, whether it's keto or whether it's carnivore or whether it's the vertical diet or paleo. I'm not too terribly concerned. I do look at things like micronutrient, sufficient micronutrients, and I look at adequate protein. I look at satiety and energy. I'm concerned that if people get hungry or if they get tired, they're going to go off their diet. Those are the two main reasons. And so I address those with dieters. Some of the key ways that people comply with diets, they've studied this as well. The top three. One is meal prep. Number one, by far, all other things together don't equal the success rate of meal prep. And we see that in the bodybuilding figure physique bikini industry. They carry around their Tupperwares and they've got their 6-pack bags. And so one of the first things I do is I encourage them to just pick a day or two a week, probably 2 days a week, and prep their meals. Because when you have pre-portioned, packaged meals in the refrigerator that you just pull out and cook, it takes a lot of the what do we call it? Food reward out of the equation. When you're hungry and you open the refrigerator and you reach for something you're hungry for, you tend to overeat it. Or if you go to a restaurant or you go to your favorite fast food place, the likelihood is you're going to overeat. And so really strongly encourage meal prep. I use some techniques in there. I suggest people use this little thermos, little 24-ounce thermos. So when they leave the house in the morning, they've got a meal or two with them until they get back at night. Keep meals hot for 12 or 14 hours. When I travel, I take them with me so I can eat on the plane and depending on how long the trip is. When I went to Moscow, I took 5 of them with me. It was a 22-hour day. And they kept my meals hot enough so I could eat the food I wanted. And one of the benefits is that you're getting, the constitution of food that you prefer, the amount of protein, carbs, and fats, right? But also that it's in the right caloric requirements for your personal diet. So, and then also the digestibility, because it's been my experience, and I suffered from this for 20 years until I figured out what it was. My trigger was seed oils, canola, cottonseed, corn oil, the vegetable oils would cause me very bad gastric distress. And once I figured that out, and unfortunately they're in everything, if you eat out of damn near any restaurant or anything like that, when I was dieting for bodybuilding shows, I would have very little digestion problems because I was making all my own food at home. But when I was powerlifting and I would go to restaurants and eat, a larger variety of food, I would end up with massive amounts of gastric distress. So another great thing about meal prep is that you can put the foods in there that really make your stomach feel good if you're knowledgeable about what those foods are. Second on the list is tracking. That which gets measured gets improved. And so I have all of my clients weigh themselves daily, write down their hours of sleep, take a picture of each meal that they eat, at least initially, until I get them, comfortable and compliant. And they send that to me on a daily basis, their morning body weight, hours of sleep, and the pictures of the meals that they eat. And then weekly, we do the waist measurement and the progress pictures, of course. So because the scale doesn't always tell the whole story, and they might have not lost any weight, but they lost 2 inches on their waist. And that's the holy grail. They're losing fat and gaining muscle. So the big thing for me, and I've actually trademarked the term because I'm a bit of an entrepreneur, is compliance is the science. And I most of what I do for people is manage the logistics. How can they more easily comply with this diet so they're more likely to stay on it long term? And is it a lifestyle that's sustainable? Or is it just, this over restriction, too much cardio? I want to lose 15 pounds in 2 months, and that's a finish line. I don't like those plans, And so that's why the 10-minute walks are so great, because they're easy to comply with. Not too many people are going to go to the gym and walk 40 minutes on the treadmill every evening for the rest of their life. But they'll take a 10-minute walk after breakfast and after dinner because they can do it anywhere.
It's funny that you say that, because my current wife, to be accurate, is from Europe, Holland. I met her when I was back in those days. They always take a walk after dinner or after a meal. They take a 10-minute walk.
I didn't invent those either, but I'm yelling at the top of my lungs how effective and how healthy and how compliant, how easy they are to do every single day.
And you don't have to walk very fast. I mean, even because I know sometimes I have a tendency, especially on the weekends, I overeat and I get that bloated feeling. But if you just go outside and walk around a little bit, it just dramatically changes the feeling instead of just sitting on the couch and feeling worse, right?
100%. And Hafthor in Iceland has a stationary bike in his garage. I've got one in my garage. You can't always walk. Weather doesn't always permit, or your environment might be unsafe. Who knows? But it's hugely beneficial. It's easy to comply with. And it's not just for dieters. All of my big bulking athletes do it for the reasons mentioned earlier: blood sugar control, digestion, and nutrient partitioning. So they do it to improve performance and better for cardiovascular fitness. So I think
it's very interesting, Stan. I mean, you take a really smart approach, which is really lacking in the industry, to a degree, because it's all based on extreme behavior. I know I was that animal. It was all based on that. Every bit of my life was based on that. We know that as a bodybuilder, it gets crazy like that. And I'm really fascinated by how there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, and I think we talked about that earlier. Like what's going on with me now, what I've been doing, I never would have done that. And I don't know that I'd be doing it if I was competing, but I do a intermittent fast every day. I don't, every single day. And Stan, I've never felt better than I have now that I'm doing this intermittent fasting. And then because I like to, and I still weigh my food every day. It's bread in me, inbred, as they say. And I just weigh my food every day. But on the weekend, I don't like doing that. It's my lifestyle just to chill and just to eat what I want. And, I'm able to maintain, I'm able to produce and reproduce my body weight at will, because I'm a big proponent of calories in, calories out. And I just believe, I just believe in numbers, and I use numbers, and then I know how to manipulate the macros. I know how to use fat to slow down sugar in my bloodstream, things like that you know about. But I'm big on numbers. So I just, I have right now I have where I eat 12,000 calories over the weekend, and I just eat what I want. I eat whatever the hell I want. There's nothing off the table. But during the week, it's a different story. It's I eat pretty darn clean. I eat, that more of a traditional type of clean diet. But on the weekend, and you know what? I feel great. In fact, when I had these strokes and I was paralyzed, I got a damn hernia from trying to rehab my paralyzed body, because I didn't go to a physical therapist because they just wanted me to get back to functional. And I said, well, screw that. I want to be 100%. So I never went back, but I wouldn't have done that if I hadn't had my sport, and my information and my background. And you know what? So I got this hernia from trying to do no weight at all, just trying to lift paralyzed body till I can get myself going again. I went to the doctor and he said, well, you're overall, you're 25% blocked, 35% blocked, I think he said, something like that, 25. And I thought that was horrifying. And he said, no, we don't even start stenting people or do anything like that till they're about 70% blocked. And I thought, I was, I'm competitive that way. So I thought for 1 year, I'm just going to change my diet and do what I'm doing right now with this intermittent fasting and clean during the week and doing whatever I want. I went back a year later and I reversed heart disease by 15%. So there's a lot of ways to get this done if you know how to use those foods, right?
No, you're 100% right. And I do blood tests on all my athletes. I encourage them for the general public as well, at least get a baseline.
Yeah.
And look at things like cholesterol and look at fasted insulin levels and triglycerides, because those are indicators of, those are leading indicators of cardiovascular disease.
Yeah.
And those are the things that are pretty easy to control with all the recommendations that we just made. You said a couple things that were awesome. We talked about compliance, and we talked there's many paths to the same destination. And really what you want to do is find a diet that the individual can stay with. Intermittent fasting is a strategy that people use to help them decrease their hunger,
right?
Which again is major reasons that people go off diets. And so is lower carb diets. Some people find that when they use like a carnivore style, maybe just steak and eggs, that they're not as hungry as often.
Right.
Another thing is just eating the same foods every day tends to decrease the amount of those foods that you eat. And I know that sounds boring, but when you look at the weight control registry for those successful dieters, the vast majority of them will say, greater than 85% will say they tend to eat the same foods every day.
Yeah.
And then you also mentioned diet breaks, which is a huge thing that's come out recently. Lane Norton talks about it a lot, the science behind eating 5 days on a diet at a calorie deficit, and then taking 2 days to eat, additional calories, obviously not off the map because the total calories for the week matters.
Yeah.
But that tends to prevent as much adaptation. The metabolism will slow when you lose weight. And we're trying to keep it, to prevent it from slowing too much.
Right, right.
And we do that, obviously with maintaining muscle mass and sleeping well.
Okay.
But also these diet breaks, dieting. See what happened? I got you back there?
Yeah,
sorry.
We're good. Yeah, we're good.
Okay, sorry. Even sometimes you could diet for 2 or 3 weeks and then take a whole week of going back to maintenance or slight surplus. That allows people long-term not to have as much metabolic adaptation, suppression of their metabolism,
right.
So they can consume more calories.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that I learned from when I was in Bulgaria, they were very interesting over there back then. I mean, they were eight years ahead of us in the West as far as application. In theory, we were ahead of them, but they operated from application first, theory second. So they just went inside a gym, or they did their nutrition. They tried things, even if it was counterintuitive, but they were just more interested in the result of it. Once it worked, then they called theory in. They said, okay, we know it works. Now tell us why, as opposed to saying, in theory, it should work, and then go try it. You see the difference in that? It was, I think it was pretty brilliant.
That's exactly yep. And that's exactly what's happening now. The things Flex Wheeler told me, Lee Haney told him.
Yeah.
We've known for decades. The matter of fact, the scientists, the Brad Schoenfelds of the world, who are PhDs and do books on hypertrophy, where they study and do biopsies and have control groups, and they study all the different variables with respect to workout programs and regimens and rest periods and volume and all of that, and tell us what's best. When I go to their seminars, they kind of lead with, "Hey, the bros were right." Yeah. The rep ranges, the volume, the frequency, training every body part twice a week, doing 10 to 12 reps, getting a pump. Yeah. They've just confirmed with science, measuring the outcomes that we've pretty much followed what worked best for most people.
Yeah.
There's always going to be outliers,
sure.
that can do one set.
Yeah.
But most successful people, they tend to do pretty similar things.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The other thing that I learned from them, they were so damn relevant, even to this day. I wrote a book called Bulgarian Burst Training. I mean, that thing is, all the information I got back in those days in 82 is still relevant. And they said, look, they said, your body starts entering into a plateau at around 21 days. And yet the real results that you really make is inside of a plateau. Even though you're making results along the way, you need plateaus are a necessary evil. And what I learned from my own training was that the plateau, I found that I could stay in that plateau from week 3 to about week 6 before I needed to move on and change what I was doing. And yet people change too soon because what they think, their brain is acting like it's an organ, not a muscle, but it acts like a muscle. So they were actually making changes based on when their brain was, when they thought that their brain had reached a plateau instead of the actual muscle. And so I found that very fascinating because it's counterintuitive. People they're avoiding the plague, especially the CrossFitters. They're avoiding the plateau like the plague. And actually that plateau is where all the best results happen. It's just not, you don't want to live there. You want to get in it, get the results, and then get the hell out of it and you make some just small changes and you know your body's going to respond in a different way, right? Let's take a quick pause to tell you about something you are definitely going to want.
Do you want a bone-crushing grip? Good, because you're going to get one with the amazing new TRS gripper. It's a progressive grip builder with longer handles and a special ergonomic design that's like a dozen hand grippers in one. Start off easy and work your way up to quickly build your grip strength from wet noodle to pulverizing. The package includes a video from the world-famous strength coach, Dr. Russ Horine, the man who worked with Leo Costa to help bring you big beyond belief in the Bulgarian power burst. Dr. Horine shows you a simple and easy to follow workout plan that takes just minutes a day right from in front of your TV set if you want. So click on the link below and let's get started building you a stronger, firmer, bone-crushing grip.
You're so right. And even Mike Israetel, a PhD in exercise science who runs RP Strength, talked about that recently. They've named that overreaching, and they like for people to get into an area where they've overreached, not overtrained, but overreached.
Right.
And then it may take a couple weeks for your body they'll even do a deload week where they just do half the sets and half the reps and let their body catch up to that point. And I learned many times that when I hit plateaus, the longer I was able to maintain that, the better my body was able to not lose. Like for instance, if I went from 180 pounds to 190 pounds, the longer I held 190, the less likely I would be to go back to 180.
Right.
And it's kind of resetting, kind of a new set point for your body.
That's true.
I would have to like force myself to eat and eat and eat and eat to stay at 190 so I wouldn't lose 5 or 6 pounds like that.
Right.
And the longer I stayed there, it became a little easier and easier to hold on to it. And I didn't wake up one morning 3 pounds lighter.
Exactly.
And then I was able to go again and try and add another 10 pounds. And sometimes those plateaus would be 2 weeks, 2 months, or longer. Yeah. But you have to earn every bit of that fighting your body.
That is so yeah, so true. And one of the things that we talked about was a training zone. We call it the optimal training zone. And because most guys in the gym, they either undertrain or overtrain. And in between that, they're going through that training zone. We explained it like, think of it like you're driving on a road with 2 lines. The idea in your training regimen, and this applies to diet as well, is stay inside those lines as opposed to going so hard that you go out the top, or that because guys that go out the top, they'd be overtrained and they come back to the training zone, but they'd undertrain. So they weren't really in that zone, you know? And we talked about in our training and our diet is hyper accelerating the body for X amount of weeks and then hyper adapting, cut the volume. And you would still have this rush from all the acceleration that you did. Even when you cut the training down or cut your diet, you still get results from it for about 2 or 3 more weeks. And that's what you're talking about right now.
That's exactly how the scientists are explaining it now. It's exciting that we've learned that decades before. Yeah. Another thing about that, I've always said that overtraining is there's kind of a self-metering process one of two things is going to happen. You're going to get sick or you're going to get injured.
Yes, that's true.
And that'll force you to take a break, and then you come back. So there was always a point at which, reality hits you one way or the other.
Yeah, that is so true. Very interesting, Stan, to be talking to you like this, how, I learned this and how we've learned this, and actually application has actually come first before theory in a way.
Yeah, application, observation. There's certainly, we've tried everything over the years. I tell everybody I've been a guinea pig all my life, for 35 years since I started competing.
Yeah. And,
a lot.
I tell people all the time, I said, if you really want to learn, and I'm stealing this. I heard it from, who did I hear it from? Don Ross. Remember Don the Ripper Ross?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, he just, I forget what I was going to say now, but anyway, he said everything works to a degree. It's to the what degree that it actually works. But you have to you got to go through that process to figure that part of it out. And this is where it separates the guys that end up, or the girls that end up doing something with this or not, because it is if you want to know, here's what I was going to say. If you really want to know how diet and exercise impacts the body, ask a world level bodybuilder that's a student of the game. They know, because of what you just said. Our bodies are our laboratories, good and bad. And like you, I've been hurt and I've been sick. I had adrenal burnout and I knew I went too far, but I learned. Many times.
We never learned the lesson the first time.
Hell no. That was
over and over. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Listen.
And that's why, when I sought out the best coaches, I went to the guys who had a 20 or 30 year career.
There you go.
I got them in retirement when they were able to think back and calmly and patiently and wisely dole out information to me. And I followed. That's another big thing, is that you have to try something. You have to give it a chance.
Yeah.
And what happens now is somebody will go out around and ask 5 different people, and then they'll just kind of, put together whatever they pick and choose, whatever they like. You have to try things, give it 6-8 weeks to really know, whether it worked or not.
One of the things I learned from Platts was he taught me to start documenting everything that I did, because prior to that, I always thought, I'll remember, what I did back then. But he said, start documenting every single thing that you're doing, because you're going to learn a lot from that. It's going to teach you where you need to go next time, So just stuff like that you get from people that just make a huge difference,
We talked, I said that meal prep was number 1. Tracking was number 2.
Yep.
That which gets measured gets improved. I haven't competed for over 7 years now, and I still have a daily checklist where I cross off my 10-minute walks, my hours of sleep. I record all of that stuff, whether or not I took my vitamin D3, I still track things, and I encourage my clients to also. Number 3 was coaching. Get a coach. Everybody should have a coach.
Yep.
I don't care how smart you think you are. There's stuff to learn out there.
Oh, yeah.
But the tracking part is huge. And Dorian Yates talked a lot about this, and he's famous for having recorded every set and every rep throughout his career and building that up.
Yeah.
And I think that's a monster. I even actually created an app. It's called My Vertical Tracker. And really all it is a compliance app that allows you to enter your hours of sleep and your morning body weight and your 10-minute walks. And you can customize your own little checklist, whether or not you take vitamin D3, or if you've got a medication, a thyroid medication or something that you're using. And so then you look at that. I look at my spreadsheet or my tracker, and it just stares you right in the face and says, look, no, you're not doing everything you need to do, and quit whining about it and just start doing it, And
when it came to a competition, one of the things that happens with a lot of guys, that happened to me, Platts taught me this too. He said, you got to think of coming into a show like a plane landing smoothly, instead of coming down and crash landing. Because how many times did I do that? I'm up here, I'm a month out or 2 weeks out. I want to tweak it just a little bit more, and boom, I go flat. It never failed. But that was the thing that he really taught me. It just, that made, all of a sudden it clicked. Like, well, yes, I should land like a plane landing smoothly instead of crash landing every time I come in.
Yep. Be patient. It's
hard
awesome.
to do. Anyway, listen, one question I have to ask you before we go. Vitamin D3, what do you think is the appropriate dosage? And does it matter based on how much you weigh? Because I hear a lot, I take D3 and I was taking more. I was taking 10,000 milligrams. I take 5,000 now a day. So what do you think is the ideal, or do you have an ideal?
Ideally, you would get a blood test, a vitamin D25 hydroxy test to see if you were deficient. Ideally, that's what you would do.
And I was, surprisingly, I was. You know, I get sun.
I was too.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I learned 10 years ago. I was too. And I had to take, I started taking, I think, 6,000 IUs. And after a month, my numbers had only moved like 6 points. So I went up to 8,000 IUs, and in a month it only moved up about another 5 or 6 points. So I took 10,000 IUs. I worked up to 12,000 IUs just to try and get my numbers from, I think they were at like 28. 30 is kind of the bottom. 100 is kind of the top. 30 to 100 is a range. Most doctors like to see in the 50 to 70 range.
Yeah.
It can take a month or two. It's not something that happens overnight. Yeah. You'll start feeling better pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But it can take a month or two to get your numbers from 30 to 50 or 60. Currently now in my ebook, my recommendation is somewhat, I think, middle of the road is 4,000 IUs a day.
Yeah.
Pretty consistently, maybe a little less in the summer, a little more in the winter.
Yeah.
And I would love to see a blood test to confirm that.
Yeah, and I do that all the time now because I'm doing HRT now, and I feel really good. And since I've been doing that, I feel much better. I feel like I'm leading again instead of following. The best way for me to explain that. But I feel much. But yeah, I'm with you. I take tests all the time because I want to see that. And when I trying a new product that can be, you know, they claim that it can be checked with blood tests. I'm with you, man. That's now you're not just shooting from the hip. You're actually, you're doing it with a smart approach. So I agree with that totally.
Throughout my competitive career from 2006 through 2016 or thereabouts, or 2015, my later, when I kind of came back and really did the bulk of when I set world records in powerlifting and became an IFBB pro, was later in my career. I had over 150 blood tests. I did them on almost a monthly basis throughout, you know, the major competitive time.
Yeah.
I would think that anybody on HRT should probably about every 3 months would be pretty recommended.
Yeah.
Because you can refine things and you can see new goals to address. And
absolutely.
There's a lot of information in there.
Yeah. And I tell you what, because, you know, I'm 65 and I just thought I should feel better. And I just tried it just to see. And I feel really good. And I went back and had my labs done. And the doctor said this to me. He says, and I saw it. I know how to read those damn things as well. He says, you have the lab work of an 18-year-old male, testosterone, 3 testosterone. And I feel good. I feel really good now, almost to the point where I don't even trust it sometimes. I feel that good, you know, to be at this age, because you don't know how you're going to feel at certain ages. And I didn't.
I agree.
You know what I mean? And I'm lucky that I feel this way. And I'm lucky that I had you on the show today, by the way. I think this has been a really great interview, and I appreciate your coming on and your insight. I think you're one of the real deals out there, and we need more of you.
I'm trying. I'm learning all the time as well. I owe it to myself and to my clients, and I'm really trying. Thank you.
And that's smart that you know something. I'm the same way. I still learn. I've been in it for 39 years almost, and I'm still learning, but I still want to learn. You know, that's what happens when you have passion for something, right, Stan?
Agreed.
All right. With that being said, I want you to go out and have not only a meaningful day, but a passionate one as well.
Thank you.
Anything that you would like to say, promote anything that you're doing besides the vertical diet? Go for it.
Yeah, you know, if anybody wants to learn more about this, just go to stanefferding.com. That's my website. At Stan Efferding is my Instagram. Stan Efferding is my Yahoo or my YouTube account, and I have dozens of hours of free information. I have that seminar, a full 2 hours on the vertical diet in Iceland. It's over 6 million views. I've got hundreds of hours of free content out there. So I don't have to pimp my vertical diet ebook. It's there if you need it, but there's a lot of great information that I've learned and shared that you can find at Stan Efferding.
Nice. Well, listen, man, you have a safe day out there and continued success. And if you got anything you want to talk about, please reach out to me. I like talking to people who know their stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, brother. Appreciate you having me.
You take care. See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Serious Growth Podcast. For more episodes like the one you just listened to, subscribe to us on your mobile podcast app and leave us a review. If you'd like to reach out, you can find us online at seriousgrowth.com. Until next time, train smart and train hard.